Okay. So, I'm Sarah Kearns.
I'm Katie Andrews.
Lisa Ball.
And I'm Allison Lansdale.
So, for this week, after reading the book, let's start with question one. So, it says, having completed the book, how has your understanding and perception increased on the process of international policy and law? I'll just give my little 2 cents and then we can move on here. Maybe that's easier. um, so I guess I'm really ignorant when it comes to this type of stuff because I knew nothing about international policy and law. So I was able to understand it a little more. It's still kind of confusing to me. I don't really get how it all works, but it has increased. So
Yeah.
that's me.
I kind of was the same way. I didn't really know much about international law or how it worked or who who were the people that set it up and stuff. But I felt like after reading this book, like I didn't realize how much it actually affects us in the United States. Well, I guess yeah, just because it can be ratified by a lot of countries, and even though it's not ratified by, like, say, the United States, it's like judges will still take pieces from it and use it to make decisions and stuff. And I don't know. I felt like I learned a lot just because I didn't know anything really about it before, like Sarah. But
I had a little bit of background, but not nearly enough, obviously, to know that international law carried such weight. I think I knew a lot, well, not a lot, but enough that a third grade teacher would need to know about local or national laws and how a bill becomes a law, that kind of thing. And of course, I always show the little cartoon to my kids, and so I understand how a bill becomes a law and how things work in the United States. But it scared me a little to know how much weight international laws carry with our country. I kind of thought we were a little autonomous in that, even though I knew we were members of the UN, I thought that we had more autonomy and that we made more of our own laws that superseded. I guess I didn't know that international law would supersede our law so much, and
yeah.
that some of the treaties have been ratified, and they supersede our laws. I think that's my biggest thing is that I learned that.
Well, for me, like, it was really scary that, like, at these conferences that they have and they sign all these bills into law and all this kind of stuff, the regular normal people back in these countries don't understand the language and the lingo put into them. So
Yeah.
they don't even know what they're voting for. They don't even know what laws they have to follow now because they don't understand the laws. And also, I like read in the book that one of the guys said that they sign these laws, but they don't enforce them. And that
Yeah.
was crazy to me. Why sign it if you're not going to enforce it? Like, what's the point? So that was crazy to me.
Yeah, I was really shocked when I read that. I was like, oh, and then like what Lisa was saying about how international law kind of supersedes our law. I had no idea. That was like a really good point because I had no idea that that was even possible. I thought we were the U.S. and we could do what we wanted. So, yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out.
There was something else that I highlighted. I'm trying to find it. That lady was talking about with regard to the UN. Let's see. Talking about, it was something about where she said, unquestionably, the power is in the influence. Um, Well, here it is. She said the ideas in these documents are all are acceptable because, well, here they are in the UN document, so they must be okay. So it's almost as if it's written and left to simmer long enough that if it sits there, people are just going to accept it. And then she
Mm.
says these documents come into domestic governments through the back door. They're just all of a sudden part of things, and people take them for granted. So I thought that was kind of interesting how a document can be written, not even ratified, and sit there waiting to be ratified, but like suddenly it becomes, so to speak, gospel doctrine. That scares me too, knowing that just because it's part of the UN, that it becomes acceptable.
Yeah. Well, and there's also a part in the book where he like talked about the first three words of the Constitution. It says "We the people,"
Hmm.
And these like international laws really aren't chosen by the people. Like the delegates that sign these laws or ratify these laws from the country, like the people don't even know that they're being ratified. So it's
Right.
really not by the people. It's just by what the delegates decide to do, kind of thing. So, but,
That's a good point.
Yeah, that was a really pivotal part of the book that kind of made you stop and think, yeah, it's true.
yeah.
The founding fathers wrote "We the people" for a reason. They didn't write "We the states" or "We the colonies," and that was
Mhm.
what he made point to.
Yeah.
Amy's coming in. Oh, she left.
All right. So, are we good? Can we go on to question 2?
Yes.
All right. So, what role did you see the Lord playing in Professor Wilkins' efforts to advocate for the families of the world? What lessons did you learn for your own efforts? Um, so, I think that the Lord played a huge part in his
Yeah.
efforts because, like, in the beginning, he's talking about, like, this is something he doesn't even want to do at all. And then he doesn't even feel like he's written an intellectual paper or anything, but all these doors keep opening, making it so like he's presenting in this giant room because people might think he's from Harvard, but he got such a huge following of people being able to listen to him, and I don't think that that can just happen from anything. I think that's definitely the Lord showing it.
And when he was preparing his speech because he got picked, there were 10 people that got picked out of like 300 people to prepare a speech for the delegates.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting that when he was preparing his speech, he like couldn't figure out what he needed to do. And so he called his wife, and his wife was, "You just need to talk about the proclamation because that's what the Lord wants, and that's what they need to hear." And so he based his whole thing on the proclamation, and I think because he did that, the Lord definitely helped him, because when he gave that speech, like there were people like crying, and they like totally changed their minds and stuff. It was pretty crazy.
For me to go along with that, like when he was put into that pool of like delegates and they had to like choose, he knew that he was going to get picked.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the Lord doing or just him thinking like he's the bomb, but
Yeah.
he knew that he was going to be picked, and he knew that he was the proper person to get this point across and say what he needs to say and advocate for the family.
I think he insinuated in there that he knew because he had this really strong impression that he needed to be. I think, yeah, I think you're right, and he knew all along. He's like, it wasn't arrogance. It was, I know the Lord wants me to do this. This is right. So he had a feeling that it was a righteous thing and that it was going to go through. Even right up to the point where the ladies of the Women's Council came up and demanded to see a copy of his speech, and they had just let the other Muslim lady go, and because they got a copy of her speech, and he didn't even question the fact that he was going to continue to be able to speak I thought that was kind of cool because I would have been like, no, I have to do this.
Yeah.
But he had faith, and I think that was neat. There's also a quote that, or something that he referenced in Isaiah 5:20. He said Isaiah knew what he was talking about when he warned us of the dangers of calling evil good and good evil. I thought that was kind of profound, so I highlighted that as well.
Yeah.
That's a good point. One thing, like the second part of the question, what lessons did you learn for your own efforts? It made me kind of realize that if I'm doing what the Lord wants, I can basically do anything. Like in one of my other classes, we're learning about the law of expectation and stuff like that, about how what you expect is what happens, basically. So if you expect something bad to happen, it's more prone something negative will happen. And if you expect great things and positive things, your life will tend to be more positive. And so that kind of makes me think about this. Like, if you expect the Lord to help you in your righteous efforts, He will help you, of course, because they're righteous efforts. And so I think that's important. That's something that I learned, that I can advocate for the family and not really feel embarrassed or weird because people aren't with it. Like, I guess, for example, I have a cousin who's extremely into the ordained women thing, and she's always posting stuff about it and, like, tearing down things I post that are good, I guess. And so, like, it's made me kind of realize, like, that doesn't really matter, that she tears it down as long as I'm staying educated and staying, like, with what the Lord wants me to do, then ultimately that's the best thing.
Yeah. Amy was texting me and she said she's having technical difficulties.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. My phone never rings. Of course. There was a part in there too that I like. I hope you guys don't mind me referencing my highlighted stuff, but it just like helps. It says, any way you slice it, it's man playing God, or in this case, woman defining good herself by her own sense of reason. What I learned about my own efforts too is that, like you just said, we have our own influence, and as long as it's a religious and righteous influence, the Lord is going to find ways. And I thought it was kind of comical that he didn't know that everyone thought he was from Harvard, but the Lord provided a way for people to be deceived in a sense. I mean, I hate to say that the Lord was deceptive. He wasn't, but it made me laugh because I thought, okay, so the Lord realized this needed to be done, and kind of like I guess I go back to where Laban was pretty much brought into the hands of Nephi so that he could get the plagues. Sometimes the Lord allows things that we would not think were proper to happen so that righteousness can go forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I kind of like thought about that. I thought, well, yeah, the Lord does kind of bend things a little bit sometimes so that righteousness can prevail. So that's kind of what I got out of it.
Yeah.
For me, I was thinking just to like actually make an effort. Like, I'm taking classes and I'm making an effort and educating myself on how to advocate for the family. And I think that's what it's all about. You actually have to try and not just sit around. So if you try and make an effort, then the Lord will provide a way for you to actually get your point across and get your voice to be heard and stuff like that.
Yeah. Just to go along with that, I feel like learning about all this and learning about the family and advocating things, and I feel like it's given me more confidence that the Lord will definitely help me when I when I decide to advocate and for the family and stuff. I don't know. Because I'm always like nervous because I don't like, I don't know, I feel like arguing with people about things is just gets you nowhere. And so, I don't know. It gave me more confidence to be a better advocator. So, yeah.
So, even though the book was largely about Richard Wilkins' experience, what important supporting roles did you see others playing in this account? Why is it important to recognize this?
For me, sorry, was someone else gonna go?
No, go ahead.
For me, I saw a big support from his wife, and she wasn't there just to support him, she was there to comfort him, because he used several times that when he called her, she just sent this sense of comfort over him, and he wasn't worried anymore, and he was okay with how everything was going, and he was just comforted just by the words that she was saying to him, even though they were thousands and thousands of miles away. For him to be able to talk to her and have her support and saying, you need to go, this is what you need to do, that would just be amazing to have a partner like that to support you in your efforts and advocating for the family.
So someone I thought about was her name Susan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She was extremely persistent in making him go to the conference in the first place. And I think that was definitely, I guess, like the Lord's hand in it. But she was very supportive and not trying to force him into doing something he wouldn't be comfortable doing, just letting him know how good his services would be if he were to go, and continually telling him. So I thought she was a really good supporting role.
Yeah.
I thought that the church members were good supporting roles, and no matter where he was way over in Istanbul. His ward was supporting him, and all his wife had to say was, I'll get the ward to pray for you and fast for you. And the ward there in Istanbul was family to him. And it's just neat to know that you can go anywhere in the world and know that you can get that support from your church, your fellow church members, and your family in the church. And even though you don't even know them, and that's happened in my family quite a bit. My parents were in a really dire situation medically when they were driving across the country, and were stuck in, I think it was Missouri, and my dad was hospitalized, and the ward there just completely surrounded them and took care of them, and it just meant so much. Hi, Amy.
Hi, guys.
Yay.
Hey, sorry. Long story. I tried to do it on my phone. I was not at my house, and then I came home and turned on my laptop because it wasn't working on my phone. But then my computer started doing updates, and the whole thing froze. So I'm here. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
We were just on the question. So the question is, even though the book was largely about Richard Wilkins' experience, what important supporting roles did you see others playing in this account, and why is it important to recognize this? And so I mentioned Susan a little bit, and Allison mentioned his wife, and then Lisa just mentioned the church members that supported him. So.
Okay. In mine, when I answered that question, I mentioned his wife too. I feel like she's a big supporting role, but I also kind of felt like that Susan lady, if you surround yourself with people that are doing this, that it's kind of your foot in the door. So I felt like that was how she supported him, because she was a foot in the door. And I thought, well, if I was ever going to advocate, how would I do that? And I think I just would have to start by getting to know people that advocate.
Yeah. Um, okay, is it okay if I go on to the next question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, ponder your readings from a sacred duty. What are some consequences and risk of minimizing or eliminating family and religion from public policy?
Mm.
Will you read the question again?
Yeah. So, after reading a sacred duty, what are some consequences and risks of minimizing or eliminating family and religion from public policy?
Well,
Go ahead.
I think the first risk is having crazy extremists run the government. I think that's the first risk.
Another risk I think is, let's see, it was talked about in the book a couple times about how when you disintegrate the family or the importance of the family, that's basically what communities are based on, and that's how children grow and learn and do things. And when the family falls apart or isn't protected, then society will fall apart, and that's definitely a big risk. But
Okay, here I go again quoting, but this part bothered me so much, and I know it probably bothered you guys just as much. When the ladies in the room, when he was preparing his speech, were talking really loud, and the one lady says, "Can you believe that someone's going to talk about the traditional family? That outmoded, oppressive institution that's been responsible for every war since the beginning of time. How could anybody defend the family? I can't imagine. And they're going to come out against same-sex marriage as well. Can you believe it?"
that made me so mad.
Yeah, and that's what I thought of when I thought of this question. I thought, are you kidding? You know, this is how some of these people feel about the best thing that's ever happened to mankind, you know? I mean, they're crazy. They're obviously tainted by a darkness, in my opinion.
Well, I don't know how you can. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go for it.
Oh no, it's okay. You go, Allison.
Mine wasn't like really pertaining to the book, but like there's this quote that kept popping up in my mind when I was reading the book, and it's from Barbara Bush, and she says, "Your success as a family, our success as a nation depends not on what happens inside the White House, but on what happens inside your home." So like even a president's wife said, it's not about what happens here, it's about what you do in your home after these things are already implemented or laws or passed or whatever. It's like what you do in your home as a family to make society better.
So I was gonna say that it's so interesting. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It's so interesting that they say that it's oppressive, but it's what got everybody here on this earth, the family. And then they say that same-sex marriage is the new thing. Well, that causes AIDS. So if you just look at the outcomes of the two, it's just common sense, you know. And I think about when she was reading the quote about Barbara Bush. There's parts of, you guys ever watched, in one of the classes they have you watch the Demographic Winter? Have you seen that movie yet?
Yeah.
Okay, well, is it parts of Russia, I think, that pay their mothers like 1/4 or something of the wage they were earning before they became a mom to stay at home. The government does. Because they get that they're going to pay all their money out in prison. In prison upkeep, if they don't keep the moms, with their families as much as possible, or at least caring more about family than money while their kids are little. So anyway, I mean, it's governments, I think, get it. And I feel like the more educated you become, the more you get it.
I feel like that was pretty well summed up. so, so I guess the next question is, based on the book, what do you think we can do about it? Does the author implicitly or explicitly make realistic suggestions for ordinary citizens as well as those in a position of power and influence? Provide examples. In my opinion, I think we can definitely advocate, like, in bigger ways. For example, I'm doing an internship right now, and for my internship, I'm like researching different blogs that are really popular among people and that have to do with families and children and stuff. And I'm writing a little bit about them, and then I have to find research that either backs up that this is like true and scholarly, or that shows that this is completely false and not something that people should love to read, I guess. And so, in a way, I think that helps advocate for the family, because there's a lot of popular blogs out there right now that anyone can write anything. And without the research or the facts, it's kind of meaningless. But to a lot of people, it's not meaningless because they take what people say like as they take what people write as professionals, even though they're not. And so I think a first step is just getting the scholarly research out there.
For me, I liked the quote that one of the guys said to him. It says, "Where have you been?" And to me, that means, like, that really hit home for me, because it's like, we're here, but are we really here if we're not advocating or standing up for what we believe in? Being missionaries, spreading the word of God around to our friends and our family, and just really standing up for what we believe in, we will be here. Like, where have you been? We will be here if we stand up for what we believe in and actually make our voice heard to other people.
I think it was incredible the reaction that he got from the proclamation, and the reaction that the world has had for this simply stated document. It's chock full of wisdom, but it's so simple. It's so elementary and logical and commonsensical, and yet people are like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, and oh wow, that's really profound. But in essence, it's like the gospel, anything in the gospel, it's simple and makes sense, but people, I think, take it a step further and say, oh, that was just incredibly profound. And really it's not. But I just think that it's neat that anybody, no matter if they're in a position of power or influence or if they're an ordinary citizen, can take that document and share it with others and have that same powerful effect. I just think it's neat how the proclamation has really turned a lot of people around as far as how they look at families.
I feel like one hidden way that he was advocating for the family was doing that play that his family was doing together. And I feel like that was kind of his way of advocating for his family in his family. If that makes sense. But I think that, yes, the UN is important, and I think that communities are important to advocate in communities. But it's also important to advocate in your own family through, showing your family that you care and creating and living the proclamation by having wholesome recreational activities and all that stuff. And I feel like also being an example and an encouragement to other families, so they can say, oh, this is how you can you can sustain your family and support your family when they look at your example.
Mhm.
I think that's a really good point that you said. I never thought about that until you said it, about how the play he did as a family really was, I guess, I guess I don't know the word. I would say implicitly applies, but I don't really know. But the play really shows um, how dedicated he was to his family and how important that he actually felt his family was. So I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't even think about that.
And then also something he kind of talked about, I think he mentioned it in his speech, maybe not, but it was mentioned in the book about how governments everywhere, okay, it says, we, we call upon responsible citizens and officers of government everywhere to promote these measures designed to strengthen and maintain the family as a fundamental unit of society. So just, and that's from the proclamation, but I think he knew how important it was to make sure that these government delegates knew that they had a responsibility to protect the family and they needed to advocate for the family because they have power and influence on what happens in their countries. But, mm,
So go ahead.
I kind of feel like financially. So I wonder. I liked how he talked about the group he organized at BYU that was basically a family advocates group.
mhm.
I think we have something like that at BYU Idaho too, that I keep getting emails from.
Yeah.
But I like that he organized that, and I would assume that the church has some kind of family advocating organization too. I don't know for sure, but I would guess. And I think that probably we could get involved in any or all of those. And one thing that we were reading earlier in the semester was that no, it was a video of the gal with the blonde hair. I don't remember her name. But she said that it was hard because all of these other voices or groups that go to support or advocate their causes, like the Women's Caucus and the other groups, are highly funded. And the family group is not as funded because all the people in it are spending money on their families. So I think that it would be something to consider, another way to consider, fundraising or donations. Or I'll bet that there's some way you could donate that to the church as part of your offerings to the church. I'll bet. I don't know.
Mm,
Yeah, it would be nice to get your family involved um, in family advocacy because I know when we got involved in Prop 8 as a family, it's impacted my kids, and I've mentioned it before, I've talked about it, but it's impacted them quite a bit. And this was years ago, and they were little, and they still talk about it like it was yesterday and like it was one of the neatest experiences they ever had. And it kind of taught them political involvement. When I was growing up, my parents were not politically involved at all, and they did not advocate for anything other than just immediate family. My mom would go to school and yell at the principal if something was amiss at school. But other than that, my parents, in fact, I don't even think my parents voted very much while I was growing up. And our kids go with us to the voting booth and stand aside while we vote and see that we're actually doing that. So I think providing that example to your kids and getting your kids involved in family advocacy, I mean, why not? It's the family effort. So
Um, so answered all the questions. I don't know if we want to go back. If Amy, you want to answer some of them, they kind of
Sure,
put you
yeah.
on the spot. But
I'll totally do that. No, great. Ask the ones I missed. That would be awesome.
okay, so one of the questions was, having completed the book, how has your understanding and perception increased on the process of international policy and law?
Okay, so this is interesting. I was telling my sister about this, and her husband has a degree in political science, and I was telling her about the UN. She said, "Well, you know what? The UN doesn't have an army." And she said, "So countries, yeah, the UN is there, but everybody kind of knows that if you don't do what the UN says, there's not really a lot they can do about it because they don't have an army, where America does and all these countries do. So there's not a lot they can do to back it up." But what I thought was interesting, after hearing that from her, is what Wilkins was saying about how um, it paves the way for the laws. It sets the tone for what's coming in the future. And I'm sorry, can you ask the question one more time, because I only got like 2 hours of sleep last night.
You're fine. It says, how is your understanding and perception
Oh, how has it changed?
increased on international policy?
Okay, so that's how it increased. Because I was thinking, well, maybe this isn't that bad. So good, I did answer the question. Think maybe this isn't that bad of a thing, you know? Maybe it's not as scary as I've been, like, having it pounded into my head this semester of how scary all these things are. So it's increased because I get that it does have an impact. It's just going to be a prelude to what we're going to do in the future.
So the next question was, what role did you see the Lord playing in Professor Wilkins' efforts to advocate for the families of the world, and what lessons did you learn for your own efforts?
Okay, let me ask you a question before I answer that question. How many more minutes do we have of our meeting? We need to be in here for an hour. Is this the class that we do 13 for each person? Or is that different class?
I'm not sure. I set a timer, and it says we have about 5 or 7 minutes left until the summary.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, then I'll tell you a story. I'm just trying to gauge my thing, and I'm so sorry to ask you this again. I want to remind you all that I have a newborn. Can you just read the question one more time?
You're fine.
Gone off
Not
track.
a big deal.
Time.
What role did you see the Lord playing in Professor Wilkins' efforts to advocate for the families of the world, and what lessons did you learn for your own efforts?
Okay, so the story I was going to tell is that I thought it was really interesting that Professor Wilkins kept saying, "I already knew I was going to be a speaker." You know, he already knew. The Lord was informing him of what, preparing him and letting him know in advance what he was going to be able to do. And I also thought it was interesting that the Lord he couldn't write very much, because in the end he only had 4 minutes. And I think that sometimes when you're supposed to do something, you just know about it, and the Lord is there with you every step of the way. And as far as advocating for the family goes, this story reminded me of a fundraiser that I did to help build some schools in Africa. And I knew we were going to be able to raise the money, and I knew that we were, every step of the way, it was just like a mirror reading this book, because every step of the way I just was like, oh, yeah, I felt that feeling before, and so I think that the Lord is there more than we think, and I think that when, with Professor Wilkins, that he showed him the path. And I think that we get desires in our hearts to do things for a reason. And I think that Professor Wilkins had that little seed planted in his heart from this lady, Susan, who got him there. And And I think that's a lot of times how it starts. So as far as my advocating, how the Lord's, the answer to the second part can be involved in that, is I think that it starts, and I mentioned this a little bit before, it starts with an introduction from someone else. Oh, they can't see me. Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry. It starts with an introduction from someone else. And so, for example, when I did that fundraiser, I just knew about some people. My sister had gone with this group. And so that's how I got introduced. So if I was going to advocate, I think I would go to the conferences of the the United Families. And do you remember that video that we watched about that college student who ended up writing all the papers, like the dads at a distance? Do you guys remember that?
I think so.
It was like in the first lesson. He started by simply associating with the people. And I think that right now, like, there's no seeds in my mind, there's no idea in my head about how I could even get started in this. But if I was to go to United Families conferences, if I was to pick a couple of organizations and just simply start being there with the people who are doing this, I think the seeds would get planted. And if I did ever have something that the Lord knew that I needed to do, that it would then become very, very clear, and that the Lord would start showing me the path. But I think that first step is just simply being associated with the right people. Okay, did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did. You did
Yes.
good. Don't worry. Okay, so then there was just one more question that you weren't here for.
Oh, okay.
And-
Sorry, I take 5 minutes on that one. That was the last one.
No, it's no big deal.
Okay, one more. Great.
So it says, even though the book was largely about Richard Wilkins. Oh wait, you were here for this one. The supporting
Yes.
roles.
You came in on that one.
Just kidding.
Oh, good. It's a good thing I was lengthy.
Okay, so if anyone wants to add anything else real quick, they can, or we can do the summary.
I just wanted to add one little thing, and I'm trying to find her name, but I don't think they ever said her name. He just called her the red-badged woman, the woman who gave him all the background information. I thought, when we were talking about supporting roles, she was actually a godsend because he got a lot of really vital information from her that I think helped him in his assessment of the situation and how to deal with these people. So I just thought maybe we should give her a little credit.
I wondered if she was his paralegal.
Yeah, I don't
Do you
know.
think she was
But
part of the UN or something?
I think she was his guardian angel. I just, people are put in your life path for a reason, and some people make all the difference. And I think, although it doesn't seem like she was doing much except yakking at him, she was giving him a lot of really good information. So, just wanted to add that little 2 cents there.
I love it. I love your 2 cents.
Thank you. Okay, who's summarizing? Oh, it's Katie, right?
I
Yeah.
am, yeah. All right, so for the summary, we, for the first question, we talked about how we learned a lot and didn't realize how much weight international law can carry and how it can even supersede our laws, and that sometimes it'll be used even though it hasn't been ratified in a certain country. We also talked about how some of these people didn't understand the language or the lingo of the laws, and how it can be tricky, and how some people will sign these laws and ratify them, and then they will go back to their countries and they won't even enforce them, and we thought that was kind of ridiculous. And then we talked about how advocating and how when you do what the Lord wants, He will help you, um, and how Richard Wilkins kind of knew throughout the whole experience that he was going to be chosen to talk and represent United Families and all those advocating for the family. And when we are righteously advocating things, then the Lord will help soften the hearts of others, and how that happened in the book and his experience. And then we also talked, and then Amy talked about at the end that the Lord will direct you on the right kind of path that you need to go, and you don't know when it'll happen or anything, but that you should be trying to associate yourself with the right people and be in the right spots at the right times so that the Lord can use you when He needs you to. Then we talked about some of the people that supported him during his experience, and the first one we talked about was his spouse, and about how important it is to have a spouse that will support you in these kind of things and help you get through these kind of trials and uplift you. And then Susan was also persistent in helping him realize he could do this kind of thing, and also how helpful she was in helping him getting documents certain and staying up late with him and figuring things out. And it also helped him get his foot in the door, because without her he wouldn't have been able, he might have not been able to do this. And then we talked about how the ward fasted and prayed for him and everything, and how that kind of support is really helpful. Then we talked about how the family is a fundamental unit of society, and how success depends on what happens in the home and not what happens in the White House. And that was a quote from Barbara Bush that Allison brought up. And then the last question, we talked about how blogging about the family and what you stand up for can be a good way to advocate the family. And then I think Allison maybe brought up about the "Where have you been" quote that was said to Richard Wilkins, and how we kind of need to be missionaries and not be like how Richard Wilkins was at first, and he wasn't an advocate, and then when he finally was, it was like a huge blessing to a lot of people. And then we also talked about how you should not only be an advocate in the community, but also within your own family, and how he did a plan with his family, and how that can be an example of advocating the family by living the proclamation. And that's pretty much it.